The mid-afternoon sun poured through the windows of the bustling downtown cafe, casting warm light on the clatter of cups, the hiss of espresso machines, and the murmur of casual conversations. Amid the organized chaos, a young waitress moved quickly from table to table, balancing trays with practiced ease, a smile plastered on her face despite the long hours and constant pressure. Her eyes flicked nervously toward the entrance whenever a loud voice or sudden commotion arose, but she had learned to keep her composure until the two uniformed officers arrived, their swagger and aggressive tone immediately changing the energy of the room. It began as subtle intimidation, comments tossed under the guise of authority, questions asked with unnecessary condescension, and a sense of entitlement that clashed sharply with the waitress's quiet diligence. Patrons felt the shift instantly, a collective unease spreading through the cafe like a ripple across water. The woman's hands trembled slightly as she poured a cup of coffee, aware of the growing hostility directed at her. It wasn't long before the harassment escalated, words became sharp, movements aggressive, and in a moment that would be seared into her memory forever, one of the officers grabbed a cup of scalding coffee and deliberately poured it across her arm, the liquid burning her skin and eliciting a gasp that pierced the tense atmosphere. The cafe erupted in murmurs of shock and disbelief, yet no one moved immediately to intervene. Fear, uncertainty, and the overwhelming presence of uniformed authority had paralyzed the room. The woman froze, pain and humiliation flooding through her, unsure how to protect herself or where help could come from. Her uniform now soaked with coffee, she felt exposed, vulnerable, and utterly powerless in the face of aggression that was supposed to symbolize protection and order. The patrons watched silently, some wincing, others whispering in disbelief, but all aware that a line had been crossed and that the situation demanded intervention. Through the sliding glass doors, a figure entered with the quiet authority that immediately drew attention. Tall, composed, and moving with the precision of someone trained to assess danger and act decisively, the Navy SEAL's presence was unmistakable. At his side, a massive German shepherd moved with controlled poise, ears alert, eyes scanning the room. There was a subtle shift in the air, a tension that demanded respect and commanded attention without a single word being spoken. Patrons instinctively stepped back, sensing that the dynamics of the cafe had just changed, and the woman, still in shock from the burning coffee, felt the first stirrings of hope. The SEAL's gaze swept the room, quickly assessing the threat, the officer's aggressive posture, their positioning relative to the woman, and the potential for further escalation. His mind worked with split-second efficiency, calculating movements, anticipating reactions, and preparing to neutralize the danger while ensuring the woman's safety. The German shepherd mirrored his vigilance, a coiled, muscular sentinel, ready to act instantly if required but restrained, disciplined, and controlled. The duo's presence alone communicated a clear message. Any further aggression would be met with immediate, decisive, and precise intervention. One of the officers, noticing the SEAL's arrival, straightened slightly, a flash of uncertainty crossing his face. He had assumed complete control over the situation, relying on uniform and intimidation to dominate the cafe. But the SEAL's calm, measured presence radiated authority that could not be challenged with bravado or entitlement. The officer's voice faltered as he attempted to issue another command, but it carried no weight against the invisible, unyielding force of experience, training, and moral clarity that filled the room. The other patrons sensed the change immediately. The balance of power had shifted, and the aggressors were no longer unassailable. The woman, burning arm throbbing and eyes wide with disbelief, took a cautious step back behind the SEAL, instinctively recognizing the protective barrier he created. The German shepherd adjusted its stance, moving slightly to ensure coverage, muscles coiled, senses alert, eyes sharp. The SEAL's posture projected calm authority, a subtle but undeniable force that left no room for further intimidation. Patrons whispered among themselves, some glancing at each other in awe, recognizing that the power of experience and moral certainty could disrupt even the boldest aggression without a single act of unnecessary violence. The SEAL finally spoke, his voice low, calm, and measured, carrying a weight that silenced the cafe instantly. "Step back! No one is being harmed here under my watch." The words were concise but absolute, and the tone conveyed an unshakable certainty born of training, experience, and a commitment to protect the vulnerable. The officers hesitated, their previous confidence faltering under the quiet dominance of a figure who demanded attention not through threats, but through presence, control, and precise authority. The woman, feeling the protective shield surrounding her, exhaled slowly, the first sign of relief beginning to replace the terror and humiliation that had gripped her moments ago. The German shepherd growled softly, a restrained, low sound that amplified the message, any continued aggression would be met with immediate and decisive action. The SEAL's gaze never wavered, noting every twitch, every subtle movement, every micro-expression from the officers. Patrons watched, rapt and silent, as a masterclass in controlled authority unfolded before them. The woman, still in shock, felt the weight of protection envelop her, a tangible reassurance that for the first time since the coffee had burned her arm, she was no longer alone, no longer at the mercy of unchecked aggression, and that justice could manifest quietly, decisively, and effectively. The cafe had shifted in atmosphere, the low murmur of patrons replaced with a tense silence. The SEAL's eyes swept across the room with rapid precision, noting every detail: the officer's posture, the positioning of tables and chairs, the distance to exits, and the proximity of innocent bystanders. Each micro-expression, each subtle twitch of muscle, was logged in his mind as potential indicators of threat. His body remained calm, yet every inch poised for immediate action, a controlled readiness honed through countless high-stress missions. The German Shepherd mirrored his vigilance, muscles coiled, eyes scanning, ears twitching at the faintest sound. Together, they formed a living barrier that communicated a single, clear message: aggression would not go unchecked. The officers, who had moments ago assumed dominance over the cafe, now found themselves unbalanced. Their prior confidence wavered under the SEAL's unshakable presence. One of them opened his mouth to speak, attempting to assert authority, but his words faltered, the certainty in his tone replaced with doubt. The SEAL's gaze did not waver, it was steady, calm, yet radiating absolute authority. He did not need to raise his voice or make threats, his presence alone reshaped the dynamics in the room. The subtle tension in his stance, the quiet readiness of the dog at his side, and the unwavering control he exuded created a psychological barrier that even uniformed officers could not breach without consequence. The woman, still wincing from the burn on her arm, instinctively moved closer to the SEAL. Every step felt like a lifeline, an assurance that she was no longer at the mercy of arbitrary cruelty. The German Shepherd shifted slightly, a silent guardian ensuring that no sudden movement or aggressive impulse could reach her. Patrons leaned forward slightly, some wide-eyed, others exchanging glances of disbelief and admiration. The quiet authority of the SEAL, amplified by the disciplined presence of the K9, had not only protected the woman but had also captured the attention and respect of every person in the cafe. The SEAL's mind moved at lightning speed, cataloging every possible reaction from the officers. He anticipated their next words, their next movements, and any attempt to assert control through intimidation. He considered angles of approach, potential obstacles, and the psychological state of each individual. This wasn't about ego or confrontation. It was about neutralizing the threat with minimal risk, ensuring the safety of the vulnerable, and restoring order through disciplined, controlled action. His every movement and glance was calculated to prevent escalation while asserting moral and tactical dominance. One officer, realizing that their previous tactics were ineffective, took a small step toward the woman, his attempt at intimidation faltering against the SEAL's presence. The dog responded instantly, muscles coiling, a low growl vibrating through the air, not yet threatening but a clear warning. The SEAL's voice cut through the tension, calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "Step back, now." The single command was precise and absolute. The officer froze, uncertainty flashing across his face, realizing that any further action would be met with immediate and overwhelming response. The patrons, sensing the shift, leaned back slightly, observing a masterful display of protective authority. The SEAL subtly adjusted his stance, moving closer to shield the woman without drawing attention to himself as an aggressor. The German Shepherd mirrored him perfectly, a fluid extension of his vigilance, scanning for any sign of escalation. The officers remained hesitant, caught in the web of authority and control that had rendered their previous behavior meaningless. The woman's relief grew as she realized the protection surrounding her was not temporary or superficial. It was precise, calculated, and absolute. The cafe, once a scene of harassment and humiliation, had become a stage where strategy, courage, and moral clarity dominated over entitlement and aggression. Finally, the SEAL allowed his eyes to rest briefly on the officers, his tone calm yet resonant as he issued another warning, measured and undeniable. "This stops. No one here is to be harmed, understand." The pause was filled with the weight of authority, and the room seemed to hold its collective breath. The officers nodded slowly, their bravado replaced with the quiet acknowledgement of consequence, their prior control completely neutralized by a presence they had underestimated. The woman, still shaking, allowed herself a small, tentative smile, a fragile but growing sense of safety in the midst of chaos. The SEAL's focus never wavered, his eyes constantly scanning, analyzing, and recalculating. Every detail mattered: the angle of a chair, the distance between tables, the subtle shift of the officer's weight, even the direction of the patron's attention. He moved with the quiet precision of a predator in full control, every step purposeful, every micro-movement conveying readiness without aggression. The German Shepherd mirrored his handler perfectly, a taut, living extension of his awareness. Muscles coiled, tail stiff but controlled, eyes locked on the officers with an intensity that spoke volumes. Any misstep would be met instantly. The officers hesitated, their earlier confidence eroded. They had thought authority alone could intimidate, that uniform and power could guarantee compliance. But here stood someone whose authority was absolute, not through rank or force, but through training, presence, and moral clarity. The first officer fidgeted, shifting uncomfortably on his feet, while the second cast nervous glances at his partner. Neither spoke, both instinctively aware that any further harassment would meet immediate consequences beyond their control. The patrons, sensing the officer's hesitation, leaned slightly forward, captivated by the quiet tension and the display of restrained dominance. The woman, still clutching her arm where the hot coffee had burned her skin, instinctively moved closer to the seal, her shoulder brushing against his side. The seal adjusted subtly, creating a protective barrier between her and the lingering threat. The German Shepherd, sensing the increase in tension, growled low, controlled and warning, a visceral signal that the line had been drawn. Patrons instinctively took a step back, some wide-eyed, others whispering softly, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. The seal's presence had transformed the cafe from a place of fear and harassment into a space where authority, strategy, and moral clarity dominated. Every instinct the seal had honed through years of high-stakes operations guided his movements. He was aware of potential escalation points, knew how to redirect attention subtly, and understood how to apply pressure without force. The officers, now fully conscious of their miscalculation, shifted nervously. They had expected compliance or fear. Instead, they were met with calm, precise authority, amplified by the K9 at the seal's side. Every glance the dog gave was an unspoken warning, a reminder that the smallest misstep could trigger an immediate, controlled response. The seal's voice, calm yet commanding, cut through the quiet hum of the cafe. "Step away, now." It was a single command, delivered without threat, without anger, yet filled with undeniable authority. The officers froze, hesitation etched into every line of their bodies. Their previous tactics, intimidation, coercion, and aggression, were rendered meaningless. The woman, feeling the protective barrier of the seal and the K9, exhaled softly, a flicker of relief crossing her features. She was no longer alone, no longer at the mercy of unchecked cruelty. The German Shepherd shifted slightly, adjusting to maintain a protective stance, tail stiff, body coiled, yet every movement controlled and disciplined. The seal's eyes flicked between the woman and the officers, constantly assessing, calculating, and maintaining absolute dominance over the situation. Patrons, silent witnesses, understood that what they were observing was not a confrontation but a demonstration of tactical mastery, moral clarity, and protective courage. The subtle interplay between man and dog created a psychological boundary that could not be crossed, reinforcing the lesson that aggression would meet immediate, precise, and unavoidable consequence. As moments stretched, the officers' hesitation grew. Their movements became smaller, their voices quieter, their confidence shattered by a presence they could neither intimidate nor predict. The seal, maintaining his calm yet commanding posture, allowed just enough movement to guide the woman slightly back, reinforcing her safety. The German Shepherd mirrored each subtle adjustment, a fluid extension of the seal's control. Every person in the cafe could feel the shift. The balance of power had changed irrevocably, and the lesson was clear: cruelty and harassment would not go unchecked. Finally, the seal allowed his gaze to meet the officer's directly, calm yet unyielding. "This stops. You will not harm anyone else here. Do you understand?" The tone left no room for misinterpretation. The officers, subdued and visibly shaken, nodded reluctantly, their prior bravado completely dismantled. The woman, feeling the protective embrace of the seal and the K9, let herself relax slightly, a small but significant sign that the immediate danger had been neutralized. Patrons exchanged subtle glances, some nodding in quiet acknowledgement of what they had just witnessed, a masterclass in protection, authority, and controlled courage. The air in the cafe had shifted completely. What had once been a tense and hostile environment now pulsed with the quiet authority of the seal and the disciplined presence of his K9. Every movement he made was deliberate, a subtle choreography of protection and control. The woman, still wincing from the burn on her arm, instinctively stepped closer, and the seal shifted slightly, creating a barrier that made it impossible for the officers to approach without immediate consequence. The German Shepherd mirrored his every motion, muscles taut but controlled, eyes locked on the potential threat, ears alert to every nuance of movement and sound. The officers, now painfully aware of their misjudgment, exchanged fleeting glances, each silently acknowledging that their usual tactics, aggression, intimidation, and condescension, were utterly ineffective. The SEAL's calm, unwavering gaze communicated the consequences of even a minor transgression, and the dog's low, restrained growl underscored the invisible line that had been drawn. The woman felt a surge of relief wash over her as she realized she was no longer alone, no longer at the mercy of unchecked authority. The protective force around her was tangible, disciplined, and absolute. The patrons in the cafe were silent, witnessing a display of precision and control that seemed almost cinematic. They could feel the shift in power, the invisible tension that communicated a simple truth. The aggressors had been neutralized not through force, but through presence, strategy, and moral authority. Some patrons leaned back slightly, impressed by the SEAL's subtle mastery of the situation, while others whispered in awe at the quiet but undeniable power radiating from the man and his K9. The cafe, once a space of potential humiliation, had become a stage where courage and discipline reigned. The SEAL's mind remained sharp, constantly scanning for any signs of escalation. One officer, still fuming but restrained by the undeniable presence of the SEAL and his dog, took a small step forward, testing boundaries. Instantly, the German Shepherd shifted, its growl a controlled warning, muscles coiling like springs. The SEAL's voice, calm yet commanding, cut through the tension. "Step back, now." The tone left no room for debate. The officers froze, their earlier bravado crumbling completely under the weight of a presence that demanded respect without a single aggressive act. The woman, sensing the growing authority and control, allowed herself a subtle exhale, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since the incident began. The burn on her arm still throbbed, but the psychological weight, the fear, humiliation, and vulnerability began to lift. The SEAL's protective positioning, combined with the dog's disciplined readiness, created a safe perimeter that reassured her without any need for theatrics or overt confrontation. Patrons, sensing the emotional shift, leaned back in their chairs, their eyes drawn to the interplay of control, authority, and moral clarity. The officers, fully realizing the error of their actions, now hesitated entirely. Their postures slumped slightly, confidence replaced with unease and acknowledgement of the consequences they could not escape. The SEAL's presence alone had dismantled their aggression, leaving them powerless to continue their intimidation. The woman, standing fully within the protective space, finally allowed herself a small, tentative smile. The tension that had gripped the cafe moments ago began to dissipate, replaced with the quiet satisfaction of justice delivered not through anger, but through controlled, disciplined action. Finally, the SEAL spoke softly to the woman, his voice calm and reassuring. "You're safe now, no one will harm you." The German Shepherd, sensing her emotional relief, nudged slightly against his handler, a living extension of protection and reassurance. Patrons watched in awe, recognizing that they had witnessed not just a physical rescue, but a masterful lesson in moral authority, tactical awareness, and controlled courage. The cafe, once dominated by fear and humiliation, now resonated with a quiet sense of order, respect, and accountability. The atmosphere in the cafe had transformed completely. The aggressive tension that had once dominated the space was replaced with a quiet acknowledgement of authority. Patrons watched intently as the SEAL maintained a poised, unwavering presence, every movement precise, every glance calculated to ensure continued safety. The officers, once confident and domineering, now shifted uneasily on their feet, their bravado stripped away by a force they could neither challenge nor intimidate. Each step, each breath was measured, and every micro-movement betrayed their growing awareness that the tables had turned irrevocably. The woman, still feeling the sting of the hot coffee on her arm, allowed herself a cautious smile. The protective barrier surrounding her, the SEAL and the German Shepherd, created a sense of safety she hadn't felt since the attack began. Every subtle adjustment of the SEAL's stance reinforced that the situation was under control, that she was shielded from further harm, and that the threat posed by the officers had been neutralized without a single aggressive confrontation. The patrons, witnessing this careful orchestration, began to exhale collectively, sensing the tension dissipate and the lesson of accountability sink in. The officers' realization deepened. Their previous assumptions that authority, uniform, and intimidation guaranteed compliance had been dismantled completely. The SEAL's calm dominance, the disciplined coordination with his K9, and the protective positioning around the woman conveyed a message that words alone could not. One officer opened his mouth, perhaps to justify his actions, but hesitated, glancing at his partner with an unspoken understanding. They were powerless in the presence of someone trained to anticipate, neutralize, and control aggression with precision. Every instinct honed in years of combat and tactical training had been deployed subtly, yet with undeniable effectiveness. The German Shepherd, sensing the officer's unease, shifted slightly, growl low and controlled, signaling that the boundary was absolute. The SEAL's eyes, calm and unwavering, never left the officers' faces, conveying a silent but profound warning. Any attempt to resume aggression would be met with immediate and decisive action. Patrons leaned back, some exchanging whispered words, others simply observing in awe as a masterclass in protective authority unfolded before them. The cafe, once a scene of harassment and fear, had become a classroom for courage, discipline, and moral clarity. The woman, emboldened by the protective presence, finally relaxed her trembling hands. She felt the weight of safety settle over her, a tangible reassurance that the SEAL and the canine would not allow any further harm. The subtle interplay of body language, authority, and readiness created a perimeter that communicated both protection and restraint. It was a demonstration of power without aggression, of courage without recklessness, and of moral authority without the need for violence. Patrons felt it too, a collective understanding that they were witnessing something rare and extraordinary. The enforcement of justice through discipline and tactical mastery rather than intimidation or force. The SEAL's voice, calm yet resonant, broke the near silence. "This stops now, no one here is to be harmed, is that clear?" The tone left no room for misinterpretation. The officers nodded reluctantly, the final remnants of their prior confidence dissipating completely. The woman exhaled, relief flooding her body, the tightness of fear and humiliation giving way to a sense of safety she hadn't felt in hours. Patrons shifted slightly, some with quiet smiles, recognizing that an extraordinary lesson had been delivered silently but undeniably. Finally, the SEAL guided the woman toward a safer position near the exit, every movement controlled and precise. The German Shepherd moved in perfect synchronization, maintaining a vigilant watch over the officers and ensuring the protective barrier remained intact. Patrons followed with their eyes, witnessing not just a rescue, but a demonstration of authority, courage, and moral clarity that would leave a lasting impression. The cafe, once dominated by fear, now resonated with quiet respect and acknowledgement of the discipline and strategy that had restored safety and order. The SEAL paused near the center of the cafe, positioning himself and his canine with subtle adjustments that reinforced the protective perimeter around the woman. His posture radiated calm authority, a presence so disciplined and assured that it left no room for doubt or defiance. The German Shepherd mirrored every subtle shift, muscles coiled yet controlled, eyes scanning the officers and the room, ready to respond instantly if needed. Patrons watched in tense awe, realizing that the atmosphere was now governed not by aggression, but by strategic dominance and moral authority. The officers, fully aware that their previous tactics had failed, stood frozen, their confidence completely dismantled. They had underestimated the quiet power of training, experience, and presence. Every micro-expression revealed their internal reckoning, embarrassment, frustration, and a dawning recognition that they could no longer assert control through threats or intimidation. The SEAL's gaze met theirs calmly but unyieldingly, a silent communication that any further action would be met with immediate, precise consequences. The low growl of the K9 punctuated the warning, an invisible but undeniable line drawn between order and chaos. The woman, feeling the protective barrier around her, exhaled slowly. The searing pain from the coffee was still present, but the psychological relief, the sense of safety and authority shielding her, was immediate and profound. The SEAL's presence had transformed her fear into calm, his controlled movements and the disciplined stance of the dog creating an invisible shield that radiated reassurance. Patrons leaned slightly forward, captivated by the precision and composure, witnessing a masterclass in tactical protection and moral clarity. The officers, finally forced to confront their misconduct, hesitated with every breath. Their earlier aggression meant to dominate now seemed petty and powerless against the quiet strength of experience and controlled authority. The SEAL's voice, calm and deliberate, cut through the tension. "You have caused enough harm, step back and acknowledge it. Now." His words were not a threat, but an irrefutable directive, authority conveyed through presence, experience, and moral certainty rather than force. The officers, shaken and subdued, complied silently, the weight of accountability pressing upon them in a way their uniforms and bravado never could. The German Shepherd shifted slightly, reinforcing the protective perimeter, muscles rippling under fur, eyes locked on the officers as if reading every intention. Patrons exhaled softly, the tension finally beginning to ease. The woman, now fully within the SEAL's protective presence, allowed a small but genuine smile to emerge. The ordeal, which had begun with humiliation and aggression, was being resolved through control, discipline, and ethical authority rather than confrontation. The cafe had become a theater for lessons in accountability, courage, and protection, a display that left an indelible impression on all who witnessed it. With one final assessment of the room, the SEAL subtly guided the woman toward the exit, the German Shepherd matching every movement with precision. the officers remained subdued. Their full realization evident in their body language, slumped shoulders, averted gaze, and the quiet acknowledgement of the consequences of their actions. Patrons watching the methodical and composed resolution understood that the power of disciplined courage and moral authority had prevailed. The cafe had transformed from a place of fear and aggression into a space defined by order, protection, and respect. Finally, the seal spoke softly to the woman, his tone calm and assuring. "You're safe, let's get you out of here." The German shepherd, sensing the shift from tension to resolution, relaxed slightly but remained vigilant. The patrons exchanged quiet nods, whispers of admiration and relief passing through the room. The officers had been neutralized not through violence, but through the strategic, controlled application of presence, experience, and moral clarity. The scene, once dominated by aggression, the morning light spilling through the cafe windows felt almost forgiving after the tense ordeal of the past hour. The woman, still wincing slightly from the burn on her arm, stood fully within the protective shadow of the seal, her shoulders finally relaxing as the heavy weight of fear and humiliation lifted. The German shepherd at his side mirrored the relief, muscles loosening slightly while remaining alert, a silent reminder that protection was still active until absolute safety was secured. Patrons watched quietly, absorbing the aftermath of an extraordinary display of authority, courage, and precision. The officers, now fully subdued, stood awkwardly in the center of the cafe, their confidence stripped away. The realization of their actions and the consequences they had narrowly avoided hung heavily in the air. They dared not speak, for the calm, unwavering presence of the seal communicated more than any words could. Every micro-expression and shift in posture revealed their acknowledgement of accountability, their prior aggression replaced by a quiet understanding that their behavior had been dismantled without violence, yet with undeniable authority. The seal, maintaining his calm demeanor, gently adjusted his positioning to guide the woman toward the exit. Each step was calculated, ensuring the protective barrier remained unbroken. The German shepherd moved seamlessly in tandem, a living extension of vigilance, subtly signaling that any residual threat had been neutralized. The patrons, still seated at their tables, watched in awe as the duo moved with quiet precision, not a single unnecessary gesture, yet every motion radiating authority and control. The cafe, once a stage for intimidation and cruelty, now resonated with quiet respect, a testament to the transformative power of disciplined courage. The woman allowed herself a tentative smile, the first genuine one since the incident began. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The seal offered a subtle nod, a small but meaningful acknowledgement that her ordeal was over, that she was safe, and that the lesson of accountability had been delivered. The German shepherd, sensing her emotional relief, nudged slightly against his handler, a tangible reassurance that protection and trust had been fully restored. Patrons murmured quietly among themselves, some with wide-eyed admiration, others simply absorbing the gravity of what they had witnessed. The officers, now silent and subdued, shifted uneasily as they processed the events. Their previous assumptions that authority and intimidation guaranteed compliance had been completely dismantled. The seal's calm, controlled presence and the disciplined authority of the canine had neutralized their aggression, demonstrating that true power required skill, precision, and moral clarity rather than force or entitlement. The lesson lingered in the room like a tangible force. Actions have consequences, and courage, discipline, and strategy can restore justice without unnecessary violence. Finally, the seal spoke softly to the woman, guiding her gently toward the door. "You're safe, let's get you out of here." The German shepherd mirrored the movement, coiling and adjusting with perfect synchronicity, a silent extension of the seal's command and protection. Patrons observed quietly, some nodding subtly, recognizing the profound impact of controlled authority. The cafe, once dominated by fear and aggression, now radiated a sense of order, respect, and quiet triumph. As they stepped into the morning light, the woman felt the lingering tension melt completely. The seal and his canine had not only protected her from immediate harm, but had restored a sense of dignity, safety, and empowerment. Marco, standing discreetly nearby, witnessed the seamless execution of strategy and moral authority, understanding that true heroism did not always require dramatic gestures. Sometimes, it was the quiet, precise intervention that left the most lasting impact. The city continued its rhythm beyond the cafe doors, but for those who had witnessed the events, the memory would endure. The seal and his German shepherd walked down the street, a living symbol of resilience, discipline, and the quiet power of courage. The woman, now safe and emotionally restored, carried with her a renewed sense of confidence and an indelible understanding of the strength that comes from standing for what is right. The patrons remained behind, inspired, changed, and aware that they had observed something rare, a lesson in protection, accountability, and moral authority that would echo far beyond the confines of the cafe. And as the seal and his K9 disappeared into the bustle of the city streets, the cafe settled into a new rhythm, quieter, more aware, and profoundly altered by the presence of someone willing to act decisively and ethically. The ordeal had ended, but its impact lingered, a testament to the enduring power of courage, strategy, and unwavering moral clarity.